I don't have hate for you. There's no hate. Jim, I want to give Jim a hand for pronouncing my last name. It's not easy to do. Yes, my name is Rayna, and I'm running for a seat on the Board of Education. Again, I'd like to thank both Jim and Tom for bringing us all together today and for giving me an opportunity to speak in front of all of you as well. So what I'm here to share is a little bit different from what I've heard some of the other speakers say. So hopefully this information will stick out. But let's take a look at school choice. I'd like to take a few minutes just to read some words that I've written down in hopes of shedding some light on the history and the evolution of our education system and the importance of school choice. And then I'll end by just talking about what's available to us as involved and concerned parents. And hopefully, if you agree with what I have to say today, you'll support school choice at the ballot box in 2024. Now, I'm going to go way back in time. I'm going to give you guys a little bit of a history lesson here because I'm an educator, and that's just what I do. Back in the late 1700s, in many regions, especially Europe and parts of the United States, the Catholic Church had a strong presence, and it wielded considerable influence over education. The church back then, and still today, saw education as a means to shape the moral and spiritual development of its parishioners' children. So a little later on, in the early 1800s, you have a prominent figure that emerges by the name of Horace Mann, and he's often referred to as the father of American education. Mann was greatly influenced by the Prussian kingdom's education system. And for those of you who are uncertain about Prussia or where that kingdom was, that would roughly be about Germany and Poland, where we know them to be today. So Mann admired the Prussian system because it had an emphasis on discipline, order, and uniformity. He recognized the importance of providing education to all citizens and not just the rich elite class, because he saw it as a means to instill civic values and create a more cohesive nation. So now, if I were to speak on why Mann was so passionate and so driven for this cause to make a serious change in policies, it would start with him as a young boy, as a poor son of a farmer in Massachusetts. This is the man who has brought us the education system that we know today. But back then, Mann knew all too well the deficiencies found even in the little schoolhouse that he was taught in. This sort of one-room, rickety shack where the education of the poor was held. And they were peppered throughout the country, whereas some people homeschooled, other people went to the church. That was how we were taught. Only the educated, only the elites, only the upper class enjoyed schooling. So taught in this rickety wooden rack with the roof leaking, taught by strict male teachers who enforced corporal punishment. This shaped Mann, and it molded Mann, who would later strongly push for and advocate and eventually manifest the existence of what we experience today. So let me move a little closer to what it is that I'm trying to say. This man believed that regardless of your social standing or your economic background, education was the great equalizer and a means to create a more harmonious and just society. And Mann's ideas received significant backing and financial support from industrialists riding high on their horses in the mid to late 1800s, industrialists like Rockefeller. And unfortunately, these powerful figures saw education as a means to produce skilled workers, a skilled workforce to drive the industrialization, to drive economic growth. And in fact, it is John D. Rockefeller himself who is famous for saying, "I don't want a nation of thinkers, I want a nation of workers." These tycoons, they understood the need for educated populace. They just didn't want them to be educated, or at least not too educated. Because if you have people that have critical thinking skills, if you have people that are able to take care of themselves, their house, and their home, then they pose a threat to you. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, because we don't need the government.
That's why you don't see financial literacy taught in schools today. That's why you don't see cursive or foreign languages like Japanese valued in the schools today. That's why there's no emphasis on teaching your child critical thinking skills, because it's all done with a purpose. And the indoctrination and dumbing down of a nation, all this is to ensure that their business successes are profitable, and this is born out of classism. This is upper class looking down on the poor and the lower class. Back then, workers were simply seen as human capital, black or white. Didn't make a difference. Just like the issues that we're addressing today, it's not black or white. It's not red or blue. It's not straight or gay. It's about rights. It's about the rights of taking back our children. At some point, we handed our children over to this system. And we have to take them out of the clutches of this toxic system that has steered so far from the beaten path. It's about our rights, about our freedoms as American citizens, but most of all and always, it's about the rights of parents. So let me just say one more thing about Horace Mann and his initiatives. Well, ultimately, it led to the establishments of public schools as we know them today, compulsory high school, established in the early 1900s, single white female teachers who are educated formally to teach a specific curricula. I mean, over the last 150 years, technology, all of the advances, how much has the education system really changed? How far has it come from being a one-size-fits-all conveyor belt now with propaganda? Today's traditional public schools are outdated, and unlike other industries that develop and change over time due to technology and change, the American education system has not. It hasn't changed much since its inception. And no, that's not entirely true. Over the time, the school system has managed to evolve into what some may perceive as a monopoly. And the government's insistence on complete and utter control over our children's education, and the lack of competition for these David and Goliath monopolies has resulted in limited options for us. So this is what I say. The education system has taken its grip on our children, and it's slowly turned into a chokehold where parents and students are held captive. And this indeed is purposefully by design. Let me tell you about another guy really quick. I'm running out of time. His name is Benjamin Rush, very influential guy. And he came around in the late 1700s. He founded a college called Dickinson back in 1783. And what this guy said about education all the way back then was, and I quote, "Let our pupil be taught that he does not belong to himself, but that he is public property. Let him be taught to love his family, but let him be taught at the same time that he must forsake and even forget them when the welfare of his country requires it." End quote. Isn't that something? If you heard what I just said there, that is really something. Even back then, to address this issue of schools and their historical overreach, it's nothing new. But it's the reason behind why I strongly encourage you to think about school choice as your exit ramp to this madness. We need more parents to join us and support the movement for school vouchers. School choice is what will put the power back in our hands. School choice is what will humble these school boards. School choice is what will snatch the decision-making authority out of the hands of corrupt teacher unions. And that's because school choice empowers us to select the institutions that best align with our children's needs. We know what our values are. We know what our family values are that we want to impress upon our children. And it recognizes that we, the parents, are the primary stakeholders in our child's education. Therefore, it's time to take our power back. Parents should have the freedom to make decisions for their children when it comes to gender identity issues. And speaking specifically to school choice, which I believe most members on the board are against at this moment, it offers us a promising solution. By putting the tax dollars allocated for education that these guys are mismanaging back into your hands, we can direct these funds to opportunities outside of traditional public schools like charter schools, magnet schools, parochial schools, and homeschooling cooperatives. Don't forget about homeschooling. This encourages healthy competition among schools. It forces these public schools to adapt and improve. But ultimately, it benefits our children. And this one is near and dear to my heart at a personal level, being that I am a homeschooler of 6 children. Being that homeschooling is an underrated alternative that I believe deserves more attention. The COVID pandemic forced many families into being what we called COVID homeschoolers. And really what was revealed is that our capacity to educate our own children outside of the traditional classroom is attainable.
Yeah, it is.
It's achievable. It's doable. You can do this.
Yes, we can.
And in fact, so many parents tell me about how they were able to slow down the hustle and bustle of the morning, that hectic morning routine, and just cook breakfast for their children and enjoy their children. So many parents tell me how they've seen their children blossom and thrive individually with homeschooling. And COVID gave us a good excuse to take a pause and reconnect with our children at a deeper level. And during this time, we discovered that we can tailor the lessons to our child for their unique needs, their interests, and their learning styles. I think I may be running a bit over my time.
For 3 minutes.
Am I okay, Jim?
No, you're at your time. We got to get to the next people.
I'll have to leave it there, but I appreciate you for listening to me. Again, my name is Rayna.
You're the one that